China is now including 17 life-saving cancer drugs in its basic medical insurance scheme nationwide after negotiations drastically cut the drugs' prices. On average, these drugs are 57% cheaper than their original retail prices, according to the National Healthcare Security Administration on Thursday. The astronomical price for cancer drugs was the theme of a popular Chinese movie, Dying to Survive, earlier this year. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang cited the movie in an appeal to China's regulators to speed up price cuts for cancer drugs and to reduce the burden on families. According to the National Cancer Registry of China, around 4.3 million new cancer cases and 2.8 million deaths were reported in China in 2015. Beijing began the price negotiations in 2016 and 3 drugs were successfully included in the plan that year. More pharmaceutical companies were invited in the negotiations last year, and 36 more drugs were eventually covered under the basic medical insurance scheme in 2017, and the negotiations will continue next year. How will the drugs bring real benefits to patients? What new hurdles are ahead, and where does China stand in cancer drug affordability? I'm joined by Xu Qingduo, Senior Fellow at Pango Institution in Beijing. In Shanghai, Dr. Mark Xu, Chairman, CEO and President of Sinomic Pharmaceuticals Incorporation, a U.S.-China oncology-focused biotech company that develops drugs to treat lymphoma and solid tumors. And in San Francisco via Skype, Dr. William Polkinghorn, co-founder and CEO of Driver, a first-in-kind treatment access platform for cancer patients. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let me go to Dr. Xu first in Shanghai. The new drugs treat solid tumors and lymphoma. Your company also deals with these diseases, and 10 out of the 17 drugs enter the market after 2017. So could you help explain to us how important the drugs are to patients and what the price drop will mean to them?
Yeah, good morning. It's great to have. Thanks for having me. I'm actually looking at the list of the drugs that are being included in the October 10th new directory by the government. I think these are great drugs. For instance, Pazopanib, marketed by Novartis, is treating renal cell carcinoma and sarcoma. These are two, some of the most deadly diseases, and they are obviously, being marketed globally at very expensive prices, on average about $120,000 per patient per year. And if the government is able to reduce the price by 60%, I think that will greatly benefits the patients here in China. Allowing the greater access to these life-saving medications. So
yeah,
that's,
Dr.
I think,
Xu,
it's a great initiative.
Yeah, Dr. Xu, officials believe that this is a win-win-win situation for both government, patients, and companies. Why are companies willing to drop their prices and go into the scheme?
I think it's a win-win for the patients and the government. It's not necessarily a short-term win for the companies. I think I speak for the industry, so I know the enormous upfront investment involved in innovating a new drug. So that's why the prices are pretty high when they're still under patent protections. I think for emerging markets like China, multinationals are willing to cut the price to increase the volume of the prescriptions, but they could potentially have a slightly negative impact on the business side as well, because it could, I could foresee a possibility that when they look at new next generation of drugs, when they introduce the next generation of drugs to the market, China may not be on their top list.
I see. So. Mr. Xu here in the Beijing studio, having heard what Dr. Xu said, what do you think? Can you relate to the concerns of these pharma companies? What do you think would be the consideration of the Chinese government trying to negotiate, trying to offer a certain kind of opportunity as well, right?
Yeah, from my understanding, obviously, for the government, it's really about, okay, now lower price, you sell more drugs to more patients, and you have more market share, so we will profit from a low price ultimately. of course, you can keep your prices high, but sell them to a small number of patients, only those who can afford such a high prices. I think at the end of the day, I think it's a win-win-win actually. The government, the patients, and the companies will benefit from such a scheme.
Okay, Mr. Polkinghorn. Now, patients should be able to purchase these drugs at a lower price by late November. That's according to Chinese authorities. Do you see more hurdles, however, before the patients can access these drugs, such as a short supply at hospitals?
Yeah, I think it's a multifactorial problem. Countries all over the world are struggling with how to pay for this. What's happened is 20, 30 years ago, going to see an oncologist was like going to McDonald's. There were a couple things on the menu: cheeseburger, French fries, chicken McNuggets. And then all of a sudden there was this explosion, an explosion of options, an explosion of treatment algorithms. And that's created a twofold problem. One is how to pay for these treatments. We've gone from a world of McDonald's to a world of walking into an oncologist office with one of those menus with 1,000 pages. And then the second problem, which I don't think we talk about enough, is in a world where all of these treatments can be paid for, are patients even getting the right treatment? And the data coming out of the United States is overwhelming, that even in worlds where these drugs are paid for, often patients are getting them inappropriately. So to me, it's twofold. One, obviously patients should have access to the full menu of options and find some way to have those paid for or pay for them directly. But the looming question now is, in a world where those options all exist, why is it that so many patients don't get the right treatment?
Okay. Well, just a side question here. You have opened an office in Shanghai. So how do you look at the kind of work that Chinese government or Chinese hospitals have been trying in providing the right medicine and the right treatment for the Chinese patients?
Yeah. So we have two flagship partners, one here in the United States, the National Cancer Institute, and one in China, the NCC in Beijing. And so we've been working closely with them to develop a tool for the oncologists, to empower the oncologists to have access to all of their options, to share all of those options with the patient. So I think China is a really, really, really exciting opportunity to develop a new model from scratch. There aren't enough oncologists. There's a big study that came out yesterday in the United States about the shortage of oncologists in the US. China has per capita 1/10 the number of oncologists as the United States. So I think there's an enormous appetite for exploring radical new models that are going to empower that population in China to have access to cancer treatments.
Absolutely. And I think the effort to bring down the price of cancer drugs is part of the effort to help cancer patients in general. Now,
incredibly important.
Yeah. Well, in terms of local affordability of cancer drugs, China has emerged as one of the countries with the least affordable prices in the world. According to a study released in 2016, the median price of 1 month dosage of patented cancer drugs in China is around $3,000 US. In the US, the number is 8,600. India, around 1,500, and in the UK, that's about 2,600. In this sense, the price doesn't seem that high in China, but in terms of percentage to per capita GDP, the number for China is 270%, compared with the US of 190% and the UK a mere 78%. India, however, is higher than China. The 1 month dosage of patented cancer drugs is over 300% of per capita GDP, but India is a different case. So, Dr. Xu in Shanghai, from a drug maker's point of view, what has caused this kind of discrepancy?
I think it's really it's country by country. So U.S. is a free market. So basically, it's the pricing is determined by the company as well as the insurance payers. So it's really a free free pricing system. In UK, I think they have a national system called an agency called NICE, which reviews the new drugs as well as comparing their potential clinical benefits, similar to China's Reform Development Committee. So UK has a more rigorous pricing control on innovative cancer drugs. I think China is somewhere in between. India, as you mentioned, it's a little bit different.